Hello and welcome back to LawTorn, the podcast which explores what happens when family fights turn into legal battles. My name is Samara Dutton. I am a partner in the private wealth disputes team at Collyer Bristow, and I am here with Philippa Dolan, a partner in our family team. Hi, Philippa.
Hi, Samara.
I am actually very excited this week because we have had a inquiry or sort of question sent in, and it relates to prenuptial agreements, and this is something that I do not know very much about, so I think I'm actually going to enjoy spending a short amount of time picking your brains on this subject. But the listener, the query that's come in is as follows. I'm getting married next spring and my fiance says he wants to sign a prenup. It says that the fiancé has a growing tech business, which he had started before they met. It says that the listener has got a teenage son from a previous relationship and that most of her assets are tied up in her house. She is a teacher with a teacher's salary and a good pension, but she's not entrepreneurial, presumably like her fiancé, and is distinctly risk averse. So apparently recently her fiancé has said to her that it would make sense to protect what they've each brought to their relationship. She feels that that's unromantic and a sign that he doesn't trust her and doesn't expect to stay with her forever. And she's taken it quite personally, I think, that he doesn't trust her to behave fairly towards him if they were to split up. So she's saying she's also worried that she might end up agreeing to something that could leave her financially vulnerable if they go on to have their own children as a couple. And she pointed out she's 37, so would have to get on with that quite soon. Apparently, they're both keen to have more children. Her fiancé doesn't currently have any children of his own. She says what makes the fiancé's proposal somewhat less hurtful is that she understands that it is his business partner who has or is applying some pressure on him to get a prenuptial agreement because he's concerned that if they were ever to separate, that she could make a claim on the fiancé's shares in the company, and then that would affect the business partner as well. As the fiancé, she has suggested to him that rather than sign a prenuptial agreement, they could deal with this by way of a postnuptial agreement after the wedding, when everything's calmed down a bit, when there presumably aren't a million other things to deal with in the run-up to a wedding. But the fiancé's told her that he doesn't think that a postnuptial agreement affords him the same protection. And she says that this all seems quite confusing. So there's quite a lot to unpack there, Philippa. I mean, any initial comments? I suppose for me, I'd always grown up understanding that prenups weren't enforceable. So I think the one major question these days is, are they?
And the answer, of course, is it depends.
Right.
But now I'd say usually. So, if you tick the boxes and you make sure that you have independent legal advice and you have financial disclosure of what you've got, and one person isn't pressurizing the other. And then there's this lovely phrase, is it fair? Well, which of course could mean anything, but they're the sort of main criteria that the court now applies if they're ever asked to deal with it.
So strictly speaking, it's not like an enforceable contract. The court can still say, no, we're not having a bar of that, not interested in that.
Yeah.
So it's up to the court.
Yeah. And we're still we're different from most other jurisdictions where they're generally regarded as contractually binding, whereas here the judge still wants to, have a good look around and dig about and pontificate and say whether it's fair or not. But I would say that there's been a massive increase in the number of people now who are signing prenups and postnups. What did she say at the end about he thinks a postnup isn't as
won't provide him
the same protection, which actually is a way of saying once he's married her, she doesn't have to sign anything.
Yeah.
So the power is all shifts once you get married. A postnup people tend to sign postnups. Well, a range of reasons. Sometimes they genuinely say, "Oh well, we'll sign the postnup because we've missed the date for the prenup," and they sign them soon afterwards because they're in love and they don't want to behave badly to the other person. But after a few years, they tend to crop up when there's either a problem, one of them's thinking, why did I marry this person? So I really, I'm thinking of getting out. So there's tension in the relationship. And then people do sign postnups, often followed by a divorce. So, or there's been some third-party involvement. Someone's about to be left a lot of money, or and suddenly the parents, grandparents start saying, "Well, hang on a minute. I've heard that so and so could have a share in this, and I don't want to leave it to him or her." And so then you might sign a postnup, and the postnups I've done, on the whole, have been because there's either trouble brewing, or because suddenly there's this windfall
injection of cash
about to appear.
But
they have no less weight,
right?
And the starting point is they have no less weight. And with prenups, because one of the issues is that you can't impose pressure on someone to get them to sign something, because not just in divorces or prenups or postnups, but generally, if someone is put under enormous pressure to do something and they haven't actually come to that decision themselves, then that might be anyway a reason for saying I can challenge it. So I find it a fascinating subject, which is when is pressure being brought to bear that's really too much. And there's this rather sort of sweet idea. One of the questions I think she asks is, we can't leave it too close to the date of the wedding or something. And that is become, it's not a rule as such, but it's a rule of thumb that you sign your prenup at least 28 days before the date of the wedding, so that you don't have all the crippling embarrassment of telling everyone you're not getting married and having to, write to all the guests. Now, personally, I don't think that's as pressurizing an event as a postnup, where you might be married with children and all sorts of complicated financial connections, and one person says, "I'm going to leave you unless you sign this postnup." Now, that's what I call pressure. But it doesn't seem to be regarded automatically in that way. So there's, you could go on forever about what the pressure on human relationships.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I suppose the corollary in what I do is undue influence, but it doesn't sound as though you would.
I don't know what the technical term is, and I don't
think
there
quite the
is
same,
one.
is it? No.
I think it is just a sense that someone signed something against their best interest because they felt they have to, and they haven't had a chance to think it through.
Yeah.
Now, frankly, if you're getting married and suddenly someone presents you with a prenup, well, it's dodging a bullet in a way. If it's come out of the blue and, you think, my God, that's not the person I'd agreed to marry. So why, in some ways, you don't sign it and you cancel the wedding and you send back the wedding dress if you're the woman.
So just to clarify, this 28-day period prior to the ceremony taking place, to the actual wedding, that is just a sort of best practice thing, or is there a guidance from the court, or is there any kind of?
I don't think there is any guidance from the court, actually. I think it's just something that's developed over the last 20 or 30 years, and we say it to clients. I mean, I've done prenups a week before.
But just with the risk that somebody may say,
Yeah, but if they've been negotiating for 2 years, frankly, and sometimes you see in a prenup, they've had plenty of time to consider this, and they first saw the draft agreement, 18 months ago or something, and they had to leave it to the last minute to sign. So it's fact specific. If you can show that clearly it wasn't someone standing over someone and shouting at them.
So if you've got to a point where, okay, the timing of when they entered into this agreement is acceptable, there's no evidence of any pressure on either party. I think what you said was that for the court to accept it, and just to be clear, that the court's not going to look at it until you come to divorce, and then it presumably sets out what they've agreed should be the financial settlement. But obviously, it could be many years later that you come to the court. And I think one of the things that you said the court will look at is the fairness of the split. So presumably what that means is that in order for the court to uphold the settlement, it needs to be fair. But what's fair at the time you enter into a prenup might not be fair when the court comes to look at it. So
very well put. And also what the court regards as fair may have evolved or changed over the preceding 10 years, so that the whole case law has changed, and what the court looks at, and how it thinks couples should be, how their finances should be dealt with, and that it meets their reasonable needs. I think it's, well, what's reasonable, what's a need? I mean, all the usual questions. So and when you say, when does the court come to look at it? Well, yes, you'll have, the marriage has ended, you're getting divorced. You will, if you're the person who benefits from the agreement, you'll say, well, here's the agreement. Obviously, we'll absolutely abide by those principles. And the other person says, well, I'm just off to see a solicitor.
Don't fancy it anyway.
And then, it could then turn into litigation. So the court then will usually treat what was in the prenup as what's called a preliminary issue. So the first thing the court will do is look at the prenup and see whether it should bind the parties. And it varies from judge to judge, because, of course, if you're talking about fairness, then you're going to bring in the whole story anyway to establish whether they've got 3 children and, they're going to be living in a shed or whatever's going to happen. And actually, I shouldn't have said that, because children always change what goes on in a prenup.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So you would never, quite often you don't really mention children, or you just use a generic phrase and say, if children are involved, then they'll be dealt with separately.
Okay. You don't ever sort of say, if we have this many children.
No, you can't contract out on behalf of the children, because it's the children's entitlement to be
looked after, and I guess you can't determine at that stage who they should be looked after by, or
but this is only money, by the way. The prenup or the postnup wouldn't. Well, I've never seen one where you'd say, and the children are going to spend 50% of their time with one parent and 50% with the other. That's totally separate. This is about meeting financial needs.
Okay, of the party. So I think that the person who sent that question in also asked, she had a child from a previous relationship. Is there anything that you can do via a nuptial agreement to kind of protect assets for your children that aren't part of this marriage? Is that
it can inform the decision, and you could have a recital so that it's, to if you like, if there's an argument about it later, well, hang on a minute, at the time you agreed to this, and I really want to protect Ben or whoever it is, but it won't carry that much weight when it comes to, it'll just be the circumstances in which you came to sign the prenup, and whether it will be fair or unfair to now not make any provision for that child. It's not making provision for a child, because, as I say, children have their own entitlement anyway. It's whether, once the child becomes an adult, would you be able to ring fence their inheritance, for example? And the answer is No, it's
Not
not
usually.
not in a prenup.
Oh, I suppose the fact that the courts don't sort of doggedly enforce a prenup means that it's got built-in flexibility, does it? But because
Well, it's got built-in risk and uncertainty. I think it's probably, but in other words, that we would always say to clients signing prenups, we can't guarantee this will be binding. We can do the best we can to looking at current cases and so on to make it as enforceable as possible. But until there's a change in the laws so that prenups and postnups become contractually binding, and I can't see it happening anytime soon. And also, if we have to change it at all, then we all agree to change it to fit with any additional wording or behaviour or anything that comes in. I mean, it's just been going on forever.
So there was a case, wasn't there? Was it 2010 that kind of turned the sea change? Right.
Radmacher, where the wealthy one was the wife, and most of us think that was relevant because if the wealthy party had been the husband, I think there'd have been more sense of the wife being vulnerable, whereas because it was the other way round, he got virtually nothing, actually. Might also have been influenced by the fact that she was German, and culturally, there's one of the factors might be, well, she's French or she's German or whatever, and you know, they expect their marriage contracts to be upheld. You can't just come and sort of take them to bits because the English judge has got a discretion. So culture also plays a part, I think, so many factors.
But so did that mark because you said earlier that there has been a noticeable increase in the use of these.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the advice is still, well, actually, you know, they're not enforceable. There's a chance the court won't take any notice of them at all. But so has it only been since then, or is there another reason? Have the courts become...
I think it's just a direction of travel with the case law. And there's been a sense that, you know, people should be able to enter into contracts if they want to, is probably the main reason. And also, of course, that courts certainly want to keep as many people out of court as possible.
This is quite a theme in litigation as well. So just going back to the question that we came in, there's also, they spoke about the fiancé's growing tech consultancy and his partner having concerns, obviously putting pressure on him to enter into this postnup to protect his business from her. Is that likely to work?
Well, you mean, does the partner have genuine concerns that he doesn't want to see his fantastically profitable business being in any way threatened by the wife of his partner saying, well, hang on a minute, I've been here at the beginning helping to grow this business, and so I've got a claim on it, I want it valued. Even valuing a business can carry risks, obviously, because it depends how you want the tax organised, and you were hoping to sort of let it tick over for another few years. So valuation is in itself a sort of area of potential risk in business. So I can see why his partners suggested it. I can see why he's used that as a reason to ask her if she'll sign it. I mean, it makes some sense to reassure a third party. So there's no reason why the man's partner in the business would trust her. You know, as far as he's concerned, she's just a potential risk to his future. And I have more sympathy, not sympathy. I understand better why, when there's another reason that's outside the couple for entering into a prenup or a postnup, I can see that as being it can comfort you, because if this woman is thinking, oh, blimey, I'm in love, I want to marry this man, it's very romantic, and then suddenly I'm being asked to sit down, read a document and sign it and go and see a lawyer, all of that, completely understandable why she wouldn't want to do it. So I think, and I wouldn't want to do it in those circumstances if it was just someone saying, oh, by the way, let's sign up because if we get divorced, then, you know, I don't trust you to behave fairly, is sort of one way of looking at it. Whereas if someone else is involved, this third party, then it means, he's just being pragmatic and sensible, and doesn't mean he doesn't love her or trust her.
That's often been the way that I've heard about these things. So usually with a sort of parents or trustees or something like that, where they've sort of insisted on prenups being entered into. But you're saying that actually people just do it off their own back a lot.
Yes, there are more and more people doing it without that sort of external pressure, I think. But, if you're being told that you might benefit from some trust, but only if you sign a prenup, well, it's nothing to do with the couple. So, fair dues, really. But I think in this instance that you've been talking about, I can sort of see why he might want to do it, because there might be a risk, because if half the couple is running a business, and it sort of, this is interesting because it said he started it already. They weren't married, and they've already got a business that's may well be incredibly successful. And if they got divorced, there was no prenup, then there'd be probably a good argument about, well, hang on a minute, I've played a crucial role in developing this business. I may not have been going into the office every day, but you chat to me every evening about, which areas you should develop into. And I've been, so you get people bringing up that sort of evidence when they get divorced. And although the court would be very wary of dismantling a business, because it would be, in theory, if she was entitled to 50% of what he owns, then she could be looking at 25% of the value of this business, assuming he and his partner own it equally.
Does it, in that context, actually, when you get to the divorce court, does the 50% partner of the business partner have any say or any access to the court to sort of make a point? No, nothing.
No.
It's literally just an asset.
It's an asset. However, having said that, clearly there's a lot of awareness. That's what I'm saying. You really wouldn't want you wouldn't want to damage an asset if you could possibly avoid it. You'd probably try and find some other way of compensating her, and you'd talk down her contribution and so on. In fact, she doesn't even have to have made a contribution. If most of the work has been done by him while married to her, then there's, she has that claim. It's the argument that you get to share capital equally on divorce.
In terms of what you've created while you've been married. Yeah. Okay.
So, I think she should give him a chance and go through with it, and not worry about her teenage son and think he's got his own life to lead.
Thank you. That's been really interesting. I do have one more question about prenups, in that I think I was speaking to somebody who has one and who said that it sort of expired after 25 years anyway. Presumably, I mean, is that what happens to them as a rule, or is that something you have to write in?
Absolutely no rule. If you don't write anything down about longevity or reviews, often you get these review provisions after 5 years or 10 years or whatever. And then it might well say, frankly, if you stuck it out for 15 years, then the prenup falls away. That's not uncommon. But yeah, if you got married in 1980 with a prenup and you get divorced in 2026, then it's still sort of relevant. Clearly its relevance has declined hugely. So the longer it's not called on, then the less weight it's likely to have.
And do people review them if they've got these clauses? Presumably they stay valid even if you don't review them.
That's what you would say. I mean, you could, in theory, you can either put in the agreement that if we review it, then we've reviewed it, and whatever the outcome is the outcome. If you don't review it, then it remains in force. And if one of you wants to, you have a review and one wants to change things and the other doesn't, then you're stuck with the agreement. That would be the normal way of drafting a prenup. But you can do it any which way. I mean, it is a contract. You are free to put in it what you like. You then obviously need, if you have an argument and you're not upholding it, you then got to go to a judge and say, this is what we said. And then the judge will
Do what he pleases, she pleases.
Within reason. I mean, they are these days. Be very odd to have a well-drafted prenup that was, quotes, fair, and a judge not to uphold it because they'd just appeal them. They'd appeal the decision.
Okay, interesting. Well, there you have it. They're not strictly enforceable, but it sounds like if they're done properly, they should be upheld.
Yes, a good way of putting it.
Thank you. Well, that was really interesting. Thank you, Philippa, for answering all of those questions. It's been really interesting to hear all your answers to that. I think that's enough from us for today. Thanks for listening, everyone, and do join us next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.